Okay, so today we're going to be covering tooth-borne surgical guides and implant planning in 3Shape's Implant Studio 2017. This is a standalone software from Dental System. If there's anybody who uses other 3Shape software, this would be an add-on that you would have to purchase. It's not included with Dental System. So this is running on 3Shape's new platform, the same platform that the Trio software runs on. And so eventually Dental System will also be moving to this and you'll have one seamless workflow. But for right now, what it'll let you do is do the planning, the surgical guide, and then you can export a surface scan with the implant information already in it and then do design straight from that. So this is the basic interface. You can sort by either patients, cases, or by a calendar. And there's very minimal setup that you need to do to be able to start doing surgical guides. If I click on more and then go to the settings tab, there's really three things we have to do. The first one is under manufacturing and then settings. I have to set an output directory. And to do that, you just hit browse and then find the folder where you want to output these guides. The reason you have to do this is that the software automatically generates all the output at the end, whereas in Dental System, sometimes there's some hotkey combos that you have to go through. The other thing is to make sure this Implant Studio option shows up. And the way that, again, this platform works, you install the base software, and then depending on what license you have, it will install additional software. But there's really two parts to the Implant Studio section of the settings. The first one is planner and guide. And so contrary to the way Dental System works, you can't just call up a manufacturer and have them import settings. All of these settings have to come through 3Shape and the manufacturer working together. This first section has to do with the default safety zone around the implants, which you'll see when we actually get into the planning. And then below that, we have a drop down where we have different preset printers, materials, and well, companies for the printer and material. So there's quite a few in here. If you don't see yours in here, that doesn't mean you can't make a guide. It just means you're going to have to pick one of these that allows you to dial in the settings to what you want. And basically these presets come from the manufacturer and what they've tested. They supply a document to 3Shape, and then 3Shape will add this in an update. But there's 4 different values that really determine your surgical guide and how it fits together. The first one is guide thickness, and you can see whatever value's in there is the recommended setting from the manufacturer, and then these numbers to the right are the range that they'll let you adjust it. So some of them have a wide range, some of them, like here on retention amount, you can't adjust that at all. So the guide thickness is kind of self-explanatory. It's how thick that shell will be. The offset from the teeth to the guide is an offset between the guide and your teeth, really to account for printer accuracy. If it was at 0, it would be too tight, and so most of them are somewhere between 75 and 150 microns. Retention amount, if the manufacturer allows you to adjust this, would actually engage the undercuts on the teeth by whatever value is here. And offset from sleeve to guide is the same as from tooth to guide. It's just between the sleeve and the guide itself, and determines how easy it is or how tight that sleeve will fit in without glue. The next section, implant library. This is where you actually download any supported implant libraries. And so you can see I have pretty much everything installed, but I left a few uninstalled. So you can see if you come in here and you have a file size instead of up to date, then that means there's an update for it. So I can just click these check boxes and go back to the top and just hit download, and the system automatically downloads these from 3Shape server. If you don't see an implant system in here that you want to use, or a sleeve system, it means that company has not worked with 3Shape to get that implemented. So you would want to contact them and maybe suggest they do that. And that being said, if like a implant company introduces a new platform, and then even though they may be listed in here, that portion of it may not be available until they provide it to 3Shape, and then it would show up as an update. So that's really all the settings that you have to worry about for the Implant Studio portion of this. Back on the home screen, I can click New Case, and it'll bring up my 3D order form. One thing to know just ahead of time is there's no direct scanning support for lab scanners in this software. You can scan Trios cases because it is all the same platform. But if you're pulling in a lab scan, then you just have to export it from Dental System or wherever you're getting it, and then you'll import it on the next panel when you're importing the cone beam. So what I'm going to do is select the teeth that I'm going to be placing implants for, and then I'll click Implant Planning. And so there's two different kinds of implant planning that are supported: the tooth supported or edentulous. I'm not going to cover edentulous today. That'll be in a future webinar. But tooth supported is going to be what comes up by default. And if you want to just do planning, then you can uncheck the surgical guide. If you want to do both, then obviously you're going to leave them both checked. And if you want to just do the surgical guide, you can do that too, if you have prior planning from another system. So I'm just going to leave that like that. And these teeth are already missing in the scan. You do have the ability to remove a tooth that is existing and place an implant there. But if the teeth are already missing and you want a guide for the final restoration, you can also click on Anatomy and just make sure Implant Studio Virtual Crown is selected. And what that's going to do is allow me to place 2 virtual crowns to give me an idea of where the final design should be, and then do my implant placement off that. Now, right now, this pre-design that you do doesn't transfer into Dental System. In the future, it will. All you get in Dental System is the implant position, but this at least gives you an idea of where you want to be. Now we just make sure that we have both the surgical guide, implant planning, and the Implant Studio Virtual Crown for both of our teeth. You can add a pre-preparation over here on the right if you want. You can set a delivery date. By default, it's going to go in-house, but if you have Communicate accounts set up, you can have it go elsewhere. So then I'm just going to click Next. And now we're at the point where we have to import scans. So first, I'm just going to click Import Lower Surface Scan. I'm going to go to where I have these scans saved, and these can be STLs or 3Shape's DCM format. And I'll just click Open. So you can see that scan there. Now I have to do the cone beam. And one thing to know about getting the cone beams is they still have to be transferred either, well, physically, either on a disk or a flash drive. There's not a digital format, like you can't send them through Communicate yet, but that should be a feature in the future. It's something they've been talking about for a while. So I just need to find my cone beam. This could be a whole list of DCM files, which is each slice of the DCM, or it could be a whole combined DCM. If it is all the different ones, you just have to pick one of them and then hit Open, and it'll pull the rest in. And what this is going to do is just give me the ability to preview the different slices of my cone beam. So that way you could at least know if the information that you need is there before you get into doing the case. So in each of these boxes, I can slide the slider left to right, and you'll see there's a colored border around each box. And then on the box next to it, you know, let's say in this center one, I can see my red and green lines, which would be this box and the far right box, and then over on the left, basically it's showing you what slice you're looking at. And as long as in this case where I'm only doing the lower, as long as I had the mandible and the appropriate side of the mandible, then I don't really need the rest of this cone beam, and we're actually going to cut a lot of it away in the next step. So once you validate you have everything that you need, just hit select, and that will go ahead and import the cone beam. All right, so once the cone beam's imported, you can just right click, rotate, view the 3D image. Then I have all the scans I need based on the order form, which is the lower surface scan and then the cone beam. If I want, I can import the upper, but it's not really necessary, but I'll go ahead and do it anyways. Another thing to note about the tooth-borne surgical guide and planning is, if possible, you want the cone beam to be taken with the bite open, because this helps with alignment of the surface scans. You can still do it if the bite's closed, but you may not get as good of an alignment with surface scans, just because when in a cone beam, when you have a closed bite, you get a lot of noise in the occlusal area. And just having the open bite gives it a lot more surface to try and align the surface scan to. So from here we can go next. And give it a second to process. So we have to go back one more step. This is the tooth removal stage, or preparation of the surface scan. We don't actually need to remove any teeth here. But if you wanted to, you click the plus, and then what we're going to do is just go around the tooth. And we've removed a tooth, and now we have the ability to contour that tissue, which you can see better if I turn the color off. And then it will leave this as a virtual tooth to guide implant placement if we were going to put one here, but we're not. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that by hitting the X. So now if I have that anatomy virtual crown in, I have a step where I can place that. And the way it works, the teeth just stay horizontal on the screen, so you have to kind of rotate the model to get it kind of where you want it so that the teeth are in a decent initial placement. And then you'll just single click. And then for anybody who's familiar with 3Shape's dental system, we have the same sculpt toolkit that we have in dental system. So, you know, transform, morph, wax knife. Now, because this doesn't actually transfer into dental system yet, I don't recommend spending a whole lot of time trying to make these look exactly like the final restoration. But just to give you an initial idea of size and position, is kind of what this is for right now. So the transform tool lets you just do large scale changes. Morph tool lets you do more localized anatomy changes. One advantage to placing these teeth, even if you're not really concerned with, you know, designing off the final restoration plan, it will automatically place the implant for each of these teeth underneath this virtual crown. If you don't have the virtual crown, then you have to use the panoramic curve to start the initial placement. So if I'm good with my placement of my teeth, I can just go next. And this is going to bring us into the CT preparation step, where we're actually going to cut away some of the CT data that we don't need. So again, we have a red, yellow, and green window, and then the crosshairs within each one corresponds to the other two windows. But then we also have this blue box, and what that is going to do is we're essentially cropping the cone beam. And if you notice, there's some information about the graphics card in my computer system. So to do tooth-borne guides, you need at least 2 gigabytes of video memory. And to do the fully edentulous guides, you actually need 4. So I would have a hard time doing the edentulous guides on this particular computer. And the other thing to be looking at is how much memory is required. So in this case, right now, without cropping anything, it's 366 megabytes. And then my volume region is valid. If this was red, it would mean it's not valid. I don't have enough memory. I can't go forward. I would need to do it on a better system. But as I crop this image, or the cone beam, just by dragging these lines, you can see it's going to change the size of that memory that's required. Now, when I'm doing that, I need to be paying attention to what I'm cropping off. So I know here I've cropped too much. I'm cropped off some of the mandible. That being said, I'm not actually working in the anterior, so I could cut that off if I wanted to, but it may make the surface alignment difficult. And I can cut out the spine. I don't need that. And then if I move to the next window, I can cut out some of that maxillary arch. Basically, I just want to make sure I cut as much of it without cutting any of my mandibular teeth off. So that's good. And then after you go through the first 2 boxes, you can just kind of view what you're cutting in the third one, but you pretty much already cropped everything you can. And so I've cut almost 150 megabytes of memory off that requirement. So I can just go ahead and click next. And there's what I have left from that cone beam. And what we're doing here is establishing the panoramic curve. In the latest update to this system, it will automatically drop in on the axial view this center line to try and create that panoramic curve. What I like to do though is take this plane and bring it down to where it's intersecting both the bone and root, since that's really the area where you're going to be working in for the implant placement. And then you can drag these little yellow balls on the axial view and try and put it so the line kind of is in the center of the axial view slice. And that'll give you a nice detailed panoramic curve. Once you've done that, there's not really anything left to do in this step. I can just click next. And that brings us into the scan alignment step. It will automatically try and align it to begin with, and almost every single time that I've done this where I have an open bite and don't have that noise in the occlusion, the automatic placement is as good as you can get. Now, if you want to tell it, take 3 points of reference, just like you can with like scanning models, you can do that by clicking these 3 points, and it's going to give me 2 windows. Now, make sure if you're doing this, you're only clicking on the enamel, because that's the only areas of the scans that are going to be the same. And after you click 3 points on both scans, it will redo the alignment. As you can see, I didn't really get any better of an alignment. If you hover over any of this area with the mouse, it'll show you how far off you are. And just to note, I think the average accuracy on a cone beam is 250 microns. So that's why this green zone we've got over here is plus or minus 250 microns. That's as good really as you're going to be able to get with a cone beam. At least the standard dental cone beams. If you go to medical cone beams, which are a lot more expensive, you can get more accurate, but it's not really cost effective for what we're doing here. So after that, I can go to manual alignment if I want. And one thing you may have noticed, I keep getting little pop-ups over on the left side of my screen. Until you actually hit don't show again for each of these, it's actually going to give you a little pop-up message telling you what you're supposed to be doing and how to do it, which is kind of a nice feature when you're first starting out doing these. So the manual alignment, what we can do is actually, if I click on this in either the orthogonal view or the tangential view, if I click on the surface scan, which is the tan scan, I can actually drag it around and try and line it up differently. But as you can see, usually you're not going to be able to place it better than what it already had. So to reset back to the computer determined alignment, I can just hit this reset manual alignment option. And now it's back to what the computer figured out was best. Once I'm happy with the alignment, I can just click on confirmation, and then all I'm going to do here is click the checkbox, and that's going to lock that alignment so it won't change. And then I can click next. If you're working on the mandible, then you will need to map the nerve, at least on the side you're working on. In this case, I'm working on the left, so I'm only going to map the left nerve. If you were working on both sides or it was fully edentulous, you would have to mark both nerves, and you would be able to tell which one it wanted you to mark just by what it says on the left. Now, if you're working on the maxillary arch, you don't have to like map the sinus area or anything like that. You do want to be aware of where the sinus is when you're placing those implants, but there's no computer marking. And what mapping this nerve is going to do is if any of our safety zones for our implants intersect this nerve, it won't let us move forward. It's saying you're too close, at least by the default safety zone, to move forward. Now you can override that into a custom safety zone, but that will show in the surgical report that you overrode the default recommended safety zone. And I'll show you that a little bit later. To map the nerve, what we're going to do is come over on the panoramic view and drag this crosshair over to kind of where we can see on this, we can see the nerve, and we're looking for the mental foramen. And you can see over on my orthogonal view, if I'm further back on the arch, you can kind of see the nerve canal. And then you start to see where that mental foramen is, where that nerve comes out. And so that's where we're going to start. And then what I can do, if I want to blow up this orthogonal view, I can just click the maximize button so I can really see what I'm doing. And when I hover over the orthogonal view, I have this round red circle. And what we're going to be doing is just clicking to map the nerve. But first we want to adjust the size of the circle so that it's at least as big as the canal that we can see, because you don't want to be smaller, or that's not going to be an accurate representation. It's better to err on the larger side. And then we'll click once at the exit and then once at the bottom. And now what we're going to do is just move backwards along the arch looking for the nerve canal. If you hold control on the keyboard and then scroll your mouse wheel, if you look over to the left on the axial view, you can see there's a light blue line. That is the slice for the orthogonal view that I'm looking at. So if I scroll the mouse wheel, you can see I'm actually going forward. So I need to be scrolling the mouse wheel the other way. And then as soon as the previous nerve marking disappears, you find that dark circle, black circle, that's the canal, and just click, single click. And now I've marked that section. And you'll actually see the circle will deform a little bit to try and map the border of that black area as I go. And then I just need to keep going until it disappears, and then click again. When it disappears, I'll click again. And so on until I've mapped at least enough of the nerve to get past where I'm going to be, or just go ahead and map the whole nerve. If you have a really low quality cone beam, this could be harder to see. And if you look over on the panoramic view, you can actually see that nerve getting marked in there as I go. But I'm going to go a little bit further. So that's far enough back. We're not placing implants way back here. So once you have that marked, I'm going to go ahead and minimize my view back to the docked layout. So now I can click next. And it'll bring me into the actual planning portion of the workflow. And as you can see, depending on what step we're on, it may expand sub-steps. And the way that Implant Studio works, like right here, I'm on implant planning. Next, I'll be on surgical guide. And then the final portion here is the approval. Once I have the approval for the planning and I tell Implant Studio that it's approved, it's going to lock this where I can only come back and view it. I can't come back and change the planning. And then there's the same thing can be done with the surgical guide once it's approved. But to start out, what I'm going to do is just decide what implant I want to start with over here under the jaw, and I'll just start with 19. So I'll click the plus, and then I'm going to get a pop-up that will show me some implants that I can select. Whatever the last system was that you used, that's what's going to pop up first. But if I click the little back arrow, I can actually see every system that I have downloaded. Now, if you don't download all the systems like I've done, you won't see all this. You can just download what you actually use. But let's see, if I go into Nobel Biocare, then I have all these different systems here. So like Nobel Active. And once you click on one, you get all the different platform diameters and length options that the manufacturer supports. Now this is where before I was saying maybe if they come out with a brand new implant, it may not show up in here right away until they've actually provided all the CAD files and information to 3Shape. The other thing you might see are anchors. This is for the fully edentulous workflow where you actually have to anchor the guide to the bone because there's no teeth to immobilize it. But I am going to go ahead and use Straumann, and I'll just do bone level. And then we'll go probably with the largest one we can fit. So I'm going to start with a 12. That's a 4.8 and then 12 long. And all I have to do is single click on that, and it'll drop the implant and a corresponding sleeve in. So then I can just close this window, and we'll maximize our implant aligned 90-degree view. And I can just click on the image and hold, and you can actually drag and position this implant. The red balls allow you to rotate. And as you rotate, it's going to keep the implant vertical and then rotate the actual image around it. Now, if you think, okay, I've got more length here, I can go to a longer implant. You don't have to go back to the library by clicking here and then picking 14. I can just grab this green ball and drag down until the number changes, and that'll change it to a 14. So here we have plenty of space away from the nerve, but let's say we were actually didn't have that much space. If this outer border, which is the safety zone, if that intersects the nerve or another implant safety zone, it's going to turn red, which indicates I'm too close to something, either another implant or the nerve. In most cases, you're not going to want to change this safety zone. It's based off of some researched standards. But if you have to, you can override this safety zone. To do that, this fourth button under the arch is set custom safety zone. I have to check the set custom safety zone box, and now I can change, let's say I want my apical distance to only be 1.5. You can see it change that value, and then the radial distance, or what's on the sides, you could change. And once you're not, the safety zones aren't overlapping something like the nerve or another safety zone, it'll turn yellow. It won't ever turn green like the default safety zone. And this will show in the surgical report, one, it's going to show what you change the safety zone to, and also it's just, a visual identifier. This is not a default safety zone. And then if I don't need that, I can just uncheck it, change our positioning on our implant. And you need to adjust the position of the implant in the implant align 90-degree view, and then over here, implant align 0. You can also open the axial view, and this is a top-down view, and you can drag and place the implant in that view. The panoramic view will kind of show you the implant position in the panoramic view, and then you can also look at it in the 3D view. And if you want to, you can slide this CT opacity towards the left and actually see the implant in the cone beam, which is kind of nice. If the sleeve is yellow in any of these views, that means it's touching surface tissue. It will allow you to proceed, but you might have some issues with seating if that's the case. Now, what you can do, depending on what sleeve kit you're using, you may be able to adjust the sleeve height. The one that's on here right now is a Straumann one, and I can view what sleeve it is by coming back over to the left and clicking select sleeve. So right now I'm using Straumann's just plain fully guided sleeve. Depending on what system is supported for the drill kit, you may have just a pilot, which will do a pilot hole. Or if I click back, I may have other options. So there may be third-party sleeves, like NT Trading has a fully guided for my Straumann one. But that means you need to use their drill kit. Otherwise, the drill procedures are not going to make sense or work, for the doctor. If we go to Straumann T-sleeve, that's another sleeve they have, and it just has a lip on it at the top. And if I just click on fully guided and then the sleeve over here, you can see it changed it. And if I click on the little green ball above the sleeve, I can drag this. It was at 2 millimeters. I can drag it up to 4. So Straumann supports several different positions of the sleeve, which will all correspond to information for their drill kit. Some sleeve manufacturers don't allow you to adjust this, and then some actually let you freely adjust it, even into fractions of a millimeter. But you need to know how that's going to affect the use of the drill kit and any drill accessories that may be needed. So once I'm happy with this placement and the sleeve, I can go on to the next one, and I'm going to just bring this back to my panoramic view, and I'll click the plus. Now you can see it turned my implant red, and this is what happens with if you don't have the virtual teeth. Is I would have to drag this crosshair to tell it where I want the implant to go, and then when I click the implant, it'll drop it in. Now, I didn't actually have to do the part with the crosshair for this, because once I clicked that implant, since I had a tooth for 18, it would automatically place it under 18. And I'll just go back to my implant aligned views. I'm going to rotate, and I'll pan the implant. You can't adjust the sleeve height from these views. You have to do that in the 3D scene. And I'll switch views. Now, if you're doing multiple implants on the same arch, you can lock them together so they will be, when you adjust one, it adjusts the others so they stay parallel. To do that, I'm going to click this third button on the left, group implants together. And then I'm just going to, the one that implant that you're on will be kind of bold and the other ones will be grayed out. But you just have to, the first box you check is going to be kind of the parent implant that once you group them all, it's going to snap them to its orientation. So let's just say I want to keep 19, which I already placed as the parent, and then 18 will be a child to that. And then if I hit group implants, it's now adjusted 18 to be the same as 19's orientation. But if I move one now, they both move, as you can see. And that is the same for the implant line 90 view. So if you do group them together, you need to make sure that you look at how it changed the other implants, because you may have placed them where, you know, in a nice orientation, and then when it snapped into the other one, it's now either, you know, sticking out of the bone or intersecting the nerve. So what we can do is just click back on 18. We can do that on the 3D view. And you'll know it's switched because your balls will be, you know, your different colored balls for dragging stuff around will be on that implant. And then just verify again in the 90-degree view or the 0-degree view that you're not, you know, violating any positioning requirements. Now, like I was saying before, if the safety zones overlap, you will also not be able to proceed without either moving the implant or changing to a custom safety zone. If you want to know any like measurements between implants or measurement from the implant down to the nerve, then what we can do is actually put a measurement in. So first I'm going to hold control and scroll through this view to the nerve showing for this area. And then I can click over the one that looks like a tape measure. Just click that, and then just single click. Sorry. On the implant, so not the safety zone, but we'll actually click on the implant and then the nerve. So we've got 3.3 millimeters here, and these measurements will show up in the surgical report if you leave them there. The other measurement you can do, the first one is just a distance. The second one is a density measurement. So if I just click anywhere, this is going to give me the density of the bone in Hounsfield units. If you want to get rid of the measurements, you can just click the garbage can and it'll delete whatever measurement you have active. So let me go back to the 3D scene, and I'm going to adjust 18's sleeve. I'm going to go ahead and switch it to be the same, the T sleeve from Straumann. And then I'm going to adjust the height. So I can go all the way up to 6 with this. Leave it at 4. From here, once I'm done with my placement, I can click next. And I'm just going to minimize back to a docked view and go next one more time. Now I'm actually in the surgical guide fabrication step. This little offset around the sleeve is what it's going to build in, and then also cut to the tissue for the sleeve support. I can adjust that size just by dragging the green balls. But the default is usually pretty good there. Over on the left, the first thing you have to do would be, if you want, you can change the insertion direction, which is that blue arrow, and you do it just by rotating to the way you would want the guide to go in, and then hit the arrow with the eye, which is going to be your from view, and that will change my insertion direction. And as well, it will change these undercuts, which are the dark areas. If you want to go back to the original insertion direction, you just hit the magic wand button, but I'm going to leave it where I placed it. Then we have to add a patch, which is going to be the border for our guide. You can just left click and draw. You can also do single clicks, pretty much the same as you would do any kind of spline line drawing in 3Shape. And we'll finish just by clicking on the first point on the line. And then we can edit again just by single clicking and holding. So then if we want to see what it's going to do, we can hit preview. But before that, let's add glue channels. And what that's going to do is let me inject glue after I put the sleeve in. And I just click each implant and then click the glue channel button to turn that on, and then I can drag that glue channel up or down depending on the sleeve design and what's required. I also have my manufacturer drop down here. This is where I can actually change what preset manufacturing settings I'm going to use. So I'm just going to leave it on 3D Systems ProJet 3510MP, and if they allow adjustment, then you can adjust these values just by clicking the arrow or actually just changing the value, but it will not let you go outside of the range the manufacturer has specified. So now if I click preview, it's going to generate the first part of the guide. Now you'll notice like I cannot click next. You actually have to preview the guide and see the shell before it will allow you to move to the next part. So we can get this little progress bar that tells us what it's doing as far as assembling the guide. So now that it has processed this portion of the guide, I can move forward by clicking next, or I can go back and change any of these settings. If I click next, that's going to take me to bars and windows. Bars let you add support bars. So let's say I wanted to reinforce these two implants because they've got a pretty small connection. I can just click the add bar, and you can either do a rectangular or a circular bar. And once I've placed it, I can change the size or rotation of it just by changing views. And it's okay if this, if I drag it all the way through here, that's fine. It's still going to cut the sleeve out. Reduce that a little bit so we don't have any sharp edges. So that'll really reinforce that area. Now you can go across the arch if you want for like support on a maxillary case. So after that, we need to add some viewing windows for a tooth-borne guide, and what that's for is letting us see that it is seated all the way down on the teeth. So usually you want to add 2 to 3 of these, and I'll just click, rotate, and usually what you want to do is encompass a cusp. Now we don't want it that tall, that's going to make the guide weak there. So we just rotate our view and then adjust that height. And if I click preview, you'll see it cut it in. So there's one viewing window. And the idea is that you'll see the contour of the guide again, meet the contour of the tooth. You'll know it's all the way seated. And then generally it's a good idea to at least put one at the midline or one on the other side of the arch as well. And definitely if you were doing implants on both sides, you would want viewing windows near each implant site, because the most critical thing is that the guide's seated there. And again, I have to let it finish generating the preview before I can go on to the next step. So there's another viewing window. So now I can go next. And the last thing we do is we can add an ID tag if we want. So if I click the plus, the default ID tag is going to be the ID number generated by 3Shape. But if I want, I can just type anything in here. And then I can change the size by clicking any of these three options. And the same way that the placing the virtual teeth worked, you have to rotate this scan. Like if you're trying to get this horizontal with like the occlusal plane, you have to rotate the scan. You can't click and then rotate the text. So then I'll just place this on by single clicking. And if I want to, by default, it's going to put it as a positive label. If I want to invert it, then on the left, I just need to click invert ID tag, and that'll make it negative. And then I wait for the preview to be generated, and I'll be able to move forward. So the preview's been generated. I can click next. And now it has to generate the surgical report. So now it has generated the surgical report. If you want to view it, you can click that button. Essentially, this is a document that shows the implant, the placement, and all different views, as well as density around each implant. And this is what goes to the surgeon for approval. So you would send this to them, receive it back signed or e-signed. Once you have a signed copy of this where the surgery or the planning's been approved, then you can check this approved planning. And basically what it says here is once you've clicked yes, you will not be able to modify the planning. You would have to create a whole new case and then import your scans and do it that way. Now, and you can see it changes this icon to have an eye on it. I can still go back and look at it, but I can't change it. And then once the guide is approved, so I can still go back once the planning's approved and then change the guide, maybe to use a different sleeve, but I can't change the implant or the placement. Or if you want to change like the border of the guide or add windows or more bars, you can still do that. Once you click approve surgical guide and then yes, you can no longer edit the guide either, and it will generate the drill protocol. And essentially what shows up in the drill protocol depends on the sleeve manufacturer and what information they provide. But in this case, this Strawman information is all that's needed for the doctor to do a fully guided placement. Some other ones are less detailed. That just kind of depends on what the manufacturers provided 3Shape with. But it'll even show the implant part number, the sleeve number, sleeve height, basically pretty much everything. So I can close here. And the one last thing to do is just click next, and we'll go to the save step, and it's going to automatically generate the guide, a surface scan with the implant placement in it that you can take into dental system and make custom healing caps or immediately, loaded temporary abutments. It'll also generate the surgical report, but it'll say approved on there instead of a signature line, and then it will make the drilling guide. So once you get a check over here on the left, if you click open folder, it'll take you to that output. I have my approved surgical report, so that way you can have a copy that says approved, a signed copy, and as long as they're the same, there's no way you went in and changed the planning. We have the drilling protocol, which we just saw, our surgical guide as an STL. So there's our guide. And then we also have a lower jaw scan with implant info, which you can't actually see, but when you import this into Dental System and then pick the implant platform, you don't have to use any kind of scan bodies or any of that to align. You just go straight into the design, and the implant analogs are in the same place as the planning. And then you can just hit close. That takes you back to the order entry or order management window, and you can go on doing more guides. So that pretty much wraps up doing tooth-borne surgical guides and planning in Implant Studio 2017.
All right, well, thank you, Evan. There are 2 questions so far, and I would remind everyone that if you do have any questions that you'd like answered by Evan now, this would be the time to type them into that place in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. The first question is, can you see the tissue thickness in a slice view?
The tissue thickness? Well, what you would look at, let me go back to planning stage. So what you would see, this brown line is your tissue, and then of course the grayish area is the bone. So you could drop in a measurement. So there, my tissue is about 2 millimeters. But that's really the only way, these different views, you can put different measurements in. So I got 1.5 millimeters of tissue there. And then if you want to change the slice that you're looking at, that's a matter of just hovering over the view and then holding control and just scrolling your mouse wheel. So. And then you can just change where this point's going to and measure. All right. I think that's really the only way that you can measure tissue thickness in the software.
Evan, the second question is there any consideration for biological width and bone reaction or loss for each system so black triangles are avoided after the prosthetics are fabricated? In essence, are Tarnow's rules applied?
No. As far as, planning methodology and all that, that's basically relies on your knowledge of implant planning. So definitely, if this is something brand new, you need to go to some courses on that. So really all that it's validating is that we're not hitting the nerve and that we're not putting 2 implants right on top of each other. Everything else is based on your knowledge of implant planning.
Okay. All right. Well, actually, the only other question was this recorded? Because this person missed it. But actually, the answer is yes, as I said at the beginning. And just as a reminder, this was recorded. So within 2 days, within 48 hours, it'll be up on the WhipMix website in the webinar section and also on the WhipMix YouTube channel. And then also, for those of you who are CDTs, webinar is approved for 1 hour of CE credit, and you'll receive an email from me within 1 to 2 days, and that'll tell you exactly how to obtain your credit. We essentially is a very short quiz and very simple one, and you'll send that in with your CDT number, etc. It's all explained very clearly, and you will receive a certificate that shows that you attended this, and it's by the NBC of the NADL, and you will get your. So I don't see any other questions. So Evan, I'd like to thank you for doing an excellent job as always, and thanks all of you for attending our webinar today. And look forward to seeing you at a future webinar, Whitnick's webinar. We have them every other week, so please look on our webpage and check out the webinar section, and you'll see. All right, thanks very much. See you all later. Bye-bye.